Have you ever stopped to think about how one choice can completely change the course of a life? The story you'll learn today begins with an ordinary man, a Portuguese man named João Barbosa, who crossed the ocean in search of riches in colonial Brazil. His dream was simple: to find gold and live surrounded by fortune. But what he didn't imagine was that his greatest discovery wouldn't be made in the mines, but within his own heart. And it is precisely this transformation that makes his life remembered to this day. João Barbosa, who would later become known as Frei Fabiano de Cristo, teaches us something few understand. What we desire isn't always what we truly need. The ambitious young man, upon encountering faith, was shaped by circumstances that led him to abandon everything in the name of a greater purpose. This radical shift not only changed his personal story, but also impacted hundreds of people around him. It's as if his journey were a map for those seeking true meaning in life. In this video, you'll learn every detail of this journey, from his youth filled with materialistic dreams to the divine signs that called him to something much greater. You'll understand how poverty became wealth, how pain turned into strength, and how his death revealed the greatness of a life dedicated to God. Stay until the end, because the lesson left by Friar Fabiano de Cristo may be exactly the key you need to see the value of the choices you have before you today. João Barbosa was born into the world in a small Portuguese village called Soengas, surrounded by mountains, herds, and a simple life. The only son of a large family, he grew up amid financial constraints. But it was precisely in this environment that he learned the value of patience and humility. The hard life taught him, day after day, that material riches may be lacking, but the richness of the soul is never lost. This lesson remains valid today. No matter where one is born, it is possible to transform lack into strength of character. From an early age, João lived with stories of how his family had once been wealthy, but now lived in times of scarcity. This reality could have provoked outrage in many, but it awakened in him a quiet discipline, a desire to grow without losing faith. Just as a child learns to walk by stumbling, he also learned to rise up in the face of difficulties. Anyone who has had to deal with family challenges knows that it is precisely there that the fiber that sustains the future is born. João carried this mark with him. Soengas is a simple environment, with its economy based on sheep farming, shaped in him not only patience, but also the sensitivity to see the value in small things. And you see, country life teaches a lot. Those who tend sheep learn to wait, observe, and appreciate every detail of the process. Perhaps that's why, later on, he found it so easy to empathize with human suffering. Because even before thinking about riches, João already had within himself an invisible treasure that would accompany him beyond Portugal. When João Barbosa heard about Brazil, his eyes shone like those of someone spotting a gold mine on the horizon. At that time, the gold rush attracted multitudes seeking fortune, and he didn't want to be left behind. Courageous, he crossed the ocean and disembarked in Rio de Janeiro, soon heading to Parity, the adventurer's starting point. It wasn't long before, through effort and intelligence, João prospered in business. He became wealthy and respected, but something still seemed missing. In Parity, João worked as a cattle driver, learned the ways of the countryside, and lived with indigenous people, black people, and Europeans, absorbing the soul of Brazil. This contact gave him a broader perspective on life. While he accumulated wealth, he saw the misery written on the faces of so many. It's curious how prosperity can be accompanied by emptiness. Today, many live in a similar situation. They have a house, a car, a job, but find no peace. And João already felt this restlessness, even with his coffers full. He was a successful businessman, but he carried questions that haunted him. How could there be so much gold circulating and so much hunger around? Why so much inequality? These kinds of questions kept him awake. And perhaps this is where João's story connects with ours. What good is acquiring riches if the soul remains thirsty? This thirst for something greater began to germinate in his heart, preparing the ground for an encounter that would change his life forever. One night, after another day of business, João Barbosa found a wounded man abandoned on the road. He didn't hesitate. He carried the stranger to an inn and spent hours tending to his wounds. But in the midst of that scene of compassion, something extraordinary happened. The man, with a firm yet serene voice, revealed words that penetrated João's soul. "Whoever you serve, You will be serving me. It was Christ speaking to him, calling him to abandon the search for earthly gold and discover heaven's treasure. This moment was a turning point in his life. Imagine a successful businessman hearing, from Jesus' own mouth, that all his efforts should be redirected to love and service. It wasn't just a vision or a strong emotion. It was a real, profound calling that left Joao in tears. And how many times in our lives do we also encounter situations in which God speaks to us through pain, someone's fragility, or even an unexpected event? The secret lies in having attentive ears, as Joao had. After this encounter, Joao could no longer look at life the same way. The shine of gold lost its value before the divine voice that echoed in his memory. And so, that man who once dreamed of riches began to understand that the true meaning of life lay in service. It was the beginning of a radical transformation. But, like every spiritual process, there were still more signs on the way, and one of them would come in the form of a dream, leading him down paths he could never have imagined. At the same time that his life was already in turmoil because of his encounter with Christ, Joao Barbosa had a dream that would forever seal the course of his life. He found himself before a man dressed in a brown habit, with a serene gaze and a welcoming smile. Upon recognizing him, he fell to his knees. It was St. Francis of Assisi. In that dream, the saint extended his hand and told him that if his heart desired to serve, he should leave material possessions and seek the greatest treasure of the gospel. There was no doubt. It was a clear, direct, and urgent call. St. Francis spoke with a simplicity that always marked his life. He reminded John that earthly goods are fleeting, but eternal goods no one can steal. This message may seem distant, but in practice, it teaches us something powerful. There's no point in accumulating money if your heart remains empty. Just look. It's not uncommon to find successful people suffering from bouts of anxiety, loneliness, and even depression. John's dream, therefore, serves as a universal warning. That which fulfills the soul cannot be bought, but is earned through service. Upon awakening, John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He understood that his mission was no longer in business or accumulated wealth, but in following a path of love and dedication. It's interesting to note how the dream was so real that it felt like a face-to-face conversation, a personal direction. From that moment on, he began preparing himself for a radical decision, to give up everything he owned. But there was still the most difficult step to take, the one that would change not only his life, but also the lives of everyone who crossed his path. After selling everything he owned, Joao Barbosa entered a Franciscan convent with the clothes on his back and a heart overflowing with peace. There, he received the name Friar Fabiano de Cristo and took vows of poverty, obedience, and chastity. He sought no titles or honors, but rather the opportunity to serve. He worked as a doorkeeper at the San Antonio convent, welcoming the poor, the sick, and the afflicted who knocked on the door seeking food or a kind word. His presence exuded calm and hope, as if every simple gesture were a reflection of God's love. Over time, Friar Fabiano was chosen for the role of nurse, and there his life took on even more meaning. He cared not only for the bodies of the sick, but also for their souls, reminding them of the importance of confession and faith. Imagine someone who, even without academic training, became a comfort to all, religious, lay, rich, and poor. Such is the power of those who serve with their heart. And here's a practical lesson. Sometimes you don't need all the resources or diplomas in the world to help. You just need to truly give of yourself. The convent, under his dedication, became a refuge for many who lived in anguish. People came to him not only seeking medicine, but also guidance, words that gave them the strength to start over. Friar Fabiano became a living example that service is the greatest privilege of all. And just look at the irony. That man who once dreamed of gold discovered that the greatest treasure lay in washing wounds, listening to people's confessions, and offering hope. But the story doesn't end there, because even his death was marked by signs that surprised and deeply touched everyone. In 1747, after decades dedicated to service in the silence of his own suffering, Friar Fabiano de Cristo felt that his earthly mission was coming to an end. Even suffering from illnesses like erysipelas, he never complained, hiding his pain behind a serene smile. 3 days before his departure, he gathered his convent brothers, embraced the sick, and bid them a tender farewell. On October 17th, he surrendered his soul to God, causing commotion throughout Rio de Janeiro. For the people, it was not just the death of Friar, but the departure of a true saint. The wake became a unique event. People tore pieces of his Franciscan habit to keep as relics. Such was the popular devotion. It was necessary to dress him more than once, so that he would not be buried without his robe. And soon after his death, reports of cures and miracles attributed to those fragments began to emerge. It is impressive how the people's faith recognized his sainthood even before the Church officially granted any title. Friar Fabiano thus became a beacon of hope that continued to shine beyond the grave. His simple life showed that greatness lies not in luxury, but in the ability to serve. And, in a way, his death merely crowned what it already experienced: humility, surrender, and unconditional love. It's curious to think that a man who once sought gold ended up leaving the world a far more valuable treasure, a spiritual legacy that spans generations. And this treasure, which no one can steal, is precisely what he found in Christ. But there's something even stronger to say. The same treasure he found is also within reach of those who seek it. Now that you've learned about Friar Fabiano de Cristo's journey, it's impossible not to ask yourself, what treasure have you been seeking in your life? Have you been investing time and energy solely in material riches, which will one day be left behind? Or have you been focusing on what truly endures, such as love, faith, gratitude, and the ability to serve? This is a challenge this man's life leaves for each of us. Gold may shine, but it will never illuminate the emptiness of the heart. What if today you decided to take a small step in that direction? It doesn't have to be anything grand. It could be helping someone in silence, taking a few minutes to pray, visiting a sick person, or even patiently listening to someone who needs to vent. These simple actions are the seeds of a treasure that never disappears. Think about it. When was the last time you did something that truly impacted someone else's life? The answer to that question could be the beginning of a profound change. So, I ask you, are you ready to seek the treasure that Friar Fabiano found? If this story touched you, if it opened your eyes to rethink the path you're on, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll always find stories that inspire, challenge, and transform. Share this video too, because it might be exactly the message someone close to you needs to hear today.